For some reason, in the middle of recording all these videos, my downstairs office people in the offices below me decided to use this huge industrial vacuum. So I hope you can't hear it. It's pretty loud in my headphones, but I think I'm able to kind of cancel out the background noise. So apologize. But in this video, we're going to talk about sum versus SUMX. And this is a pretty complicated topic, and I'm going to do the best I can. But it is, for whatever reason, it's just not easy for most people to understand. So what you'll notice is that I have total sales here, and total sales uses sum. What sum is what's called an aggregator function in DAX. And what that means is it uses the filter context like we've explained in all the previous videos. In fact, if you haven't seen the previous videos, you probably need to see most of them in order to understand the difference because it requires a lot of background knowledge. But just understand that what I'm doing here is I'm aggregating just like DAX does when it creates as a measure and uses any other filter context measure. So if I come over here into this other total sales, this uses SUMX. SUMX is what's called an iterator function. It iterates row by row, giving context to the sum row by row. Now, if you look back at the original video, the very first video that we did, when we looked at total sales, what we did here was we used order line total. So we summed this thing. We've been doing it for, 10 videos now, right? Order line total is a calculated column. If we go down into sales order details, right, which was one of our earlier tables, and we look at order line total, that calculated column times quantity times unit price row by row. That's what calculated columns do. So if we come back up here and we look at total sales, you'll see that once we have the order line total created row by row, we can then go sum it, aggregating it. Okay, if we look back now at SUMX says we're not using the calculated column. Instead, what we're doing is we're multiplying the same sum, but we're making sure that we use the row context row by row, and we're basically pretending like we're creating our own calculated column. Why does that matter? Why do we need to do an iterator here instead of an aggregator? Well, let's pretend to use the aggregator. Here, I've created a measure called bad measure, right? And what we're doing here is we're using sum, but we're multiplying the sum of unit price by the sum of quantity. And we're getting a bad result here. Notice that when we did our measures before, we were getting 1.35 million, and now we're getting 2.88899 million. Why so high? Well, what bad measure does is it takes all of the unit prices. Like we could have a unit price of $5, $10. We could have one for $1,500. That's going to skew the result. And then it takes the sum of all those unit prices together. And then it takes all of our quantities and it takes all the sum of all the quantities. And then it multiplies those two products together and gives you bad measure. Now, that's obviously way too high, right? That's obviously bad math. We can't do that. So the reason why, if we compare that to just total sales sum X, hey, we get 1.35 million. And if we compare that to the total sales we've been doing over and over, we get 1.35 million. So we know that the sum X is working. Why? Let's repeat ourselves because sum X is going into order details and it's iterating row by row and multiplying quantity by unit price row by row, and it's taking the result and it's totaling the result back at the end of the day and giving you total sales sum X. So sum X is using an iteration. The total sales is aggregating because we were doing the iteration somewhere else. We were doing it in a calculated column, so we didn't need to do that again. And that's the difference between sum and SUMX. One is aggregating the total, one is iterating and then giving us the total. And it's a weird distinction, but it's a distinction that might save you one day as you try to create complicated measures. Oh, and there was one more thing I wanted to say. It's not just sum and sum x. You can see that there's average and average x and count x and a lot of max and max x. So anytime you see the x at the end of any of the functions, that's iterating over row by row, where the one without the x is aggregating the total, just like all the other filter context measures that we talked about earlier in the videos. Hopefully that helps you clarify those things. Thanks.
And finally, this is how you can get a hold of me if you need to. There's my Twitter and my email address, and of course my YouTube channel if you want to subscribe and get more videos on DAX and Power Apps and data engineering and cloud data and other things that interest me. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks. Have a great day.